Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Do you judge a book by its cover? I literally do. Unless I've heard of it elsewhere and it sounded good or somebody recommended it to me, I usually go with the first cover that grabs my attention when I'm looking at books. And yes, I can do this with people too. I can assume their circumstances based on their appearance. It's taken the Holy Spirit and a lot of undoing of arrogance and assumption to be able to look at people with compassionate curiosity instead of putting them in a box and closing the lid. Hey, this is Jen. You're listening to the Bible for Busy People. This week we're talking about Jesus' encounters with the Pharisees. And we can't know someone's story until we engage with them. But sometimes we try to determine whether or not someone is good by the situation that they're in. And this is the story that we're looking at today. Jesus challenged this kind of thinking. We're reading today in John chapter 9, starting in verse 1. It says, as Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with his saliva, and put it in the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. This is important. This is how people saw hardship in life. It must have been caused by your own sin. You got yourself into this mess somehow. You displeased God. I used to see God this way. So when I read this story, I would agree with Jesus, but in my heart of hearts, I would think, but isn't that correct? Hardship is the consequence of your sin, right? The question of meritocracy is still a big one today. We believe good things should happen to good people and bad things should happen to bad people. But it doesn't always work like that. Some of the best people I know had cancer. Some of the people responsible for the most deplorable actions walk free and even seem like they have everything they could ever want. There are so many Psalms that lament over this. God doesn't operate this way. He's not holding a scale and putting all your actions on it to see which way it tips so he knows which way to bless you. He's not poised and ready to strike you down the minute you mess up. He's not tricking you by telling you to do one thing and then blessing people who do the opposite. God works outside of our systems and ways of thinking. God is love. God is abundantly generous and God is compassionate and gracious. So perhaps we need to rethink our questions. Maybe the question is not, why is God punishing me or someone else, but rather, what is God up to in our lives? What good is he working here? And how am I part of the bigger story? Another question that comes to mind here is, why did Jesus spit on the ground to make mud? That is disgusting. Some say it goes back to the creation story, the making of a solve from mud on the ground, just like people were made from dirt. I came across a post by Bob Yandian who said that while spitting on someone is a great insult, Jesus spit on the ground as an affront to blindness, to sickness and disease, things that were not part of the original creation or design. Whatever the reason, the man went and washed and came home seeing, to the surprise of his whole community. And some of them didn't even believe it was him. In the next passages, which you can go back and read, they're questioning that. And I have to ask, we talked about this before on the podcast, but are you involved in your community? Do you know your neighbors well enough to know what's going on in their lives, to even recognize them when you see them out of context? Curious about that, but I'll leave you with those questions. And then the Pharisees came in. In verse 13, it says, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? Is your eyes he opened? The man replied, he is a prophet. Here's something interesting. We've already talked about the Sabbath and all of its rules as held by the Pharisees and passed on to the people. So technically, there should have been no healing, no working, but Jesus made mud, and no unclean people in the temple. The man had contact with spit. He shouldn't have been even allowed there. So, of course, this story contains breaking all of these societal rules. So maybe that is the answer, that Jesus wanted to rile up the Pharisees in all the ways, shaking up all of society's standards. So he made the mud, he healed on the Sabbath, all of these things. Jesus, as we've discussed, is Lord of the Sabbath, the Word in flesh, God himself, greater than the temple, above all of the ways that we try to measure and earn. So again, we've already talked about this in a different episode, but this is important, that Jesus is above all of this. Next, they question his parents, who quickly throw him under the bus. Elisa points out in the Women in Theology blog, I would ask, who failed this man such that he was reduced to begging on the side of the road? Did his parents have enough and yet abandon him due to his disability? Or was it a societal failure to take care of the needy families in their midst? Again, maybe there's a bigger question here. How was the man failed by others instead of how did the man fail? We don't have time to read the rest of the story, but basically the man made declarations of faith before the Pharisees. All the other people were worried about his or their own reputations, about man-made rules, about all the wrong things. And of everyone, the man born blind who could then see was the one who got it. He goes back and is able to talk to Jesus. And because of the man's faith, he was honored by Jesus, telling him the truth about who he is. Most people didn't get that because they weren't in a place where their faith was ready to hear it. At the end, there was another run-in with the Pharisees, and Jesus challenged them on all the things holding them back from seeing clearly. They claimed to know God the best, but missed him right there in front of them. I encourage you to go back and read this story in full. It's the whole of John chapter 9. But my question for you as we're closing out is, are our eyes open to seeing Jesus right in front of us? How about the needs around us and our neighbors and our communities? Are our eyes open so that we're able to see? I'll leave you with that, and let's talk more tomorrow about the Pharisees and their encounters with Jesus. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume two things about you. First of all, that you're a busy person. And second, that you are in need of a restful break. Cannon Beach Conference Center is the place for a beautiful coastal retreat. Whether it's one of their enriching conferences or your own church or ministry event. You can find out more at 800-745-1546 or visit cbcc.net. Thank you to Cannon Beach Conference Center for sponsoring the Bible for Busy People.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.